Hello everybody, welcome to another movie in this tutorial series by Renderosity on POSER 10 and POSER Pro 2014. I'm Mark Bremer, and in this movie we get to play with some really fun stuff. It is creating custom morph dials and working with magnets. This facility gives you the ability to customize lots of stock content, and not just people. Animals, buildings, whatever. It's some customization tools because, as I keep beating this drum, POSER is a content manipulation program, not a content creation program. So there are tool sets to change what you bring into the program, and that's what morph dials do. I have selected a character, Roxy, and Ryan, and one of the reasons I have done this is because there are several kind of cool features. These are more advanced characters, and some of the things I will be showing you, like all the morph dials and options we have with Roxy, they aren't common to all the POSER catalog. The older the character is, the less likely they are to have some of these really cool features. Don't sweat it, you can make some of your own and bring them up to speed if you would like. So let's explain what I'm working with here, and I need to have a little preamble real quick. This is more of an advanced type of tutorial. I don't go into the basics of how to get around POSER and make things work. So if it seems like I'm skipping over stuff, it's because I covered it in one of the tutorial series before this one, so go ahead and look through the Renderosity catalog and learn a little bit about that if you don't. So let's jump in here. I have Roxy selected, top level, the body is activated. We can see that she comes with a ton of morphs. The FBM stands for full body morphs. And if I click this and we can scroll, there's lots of things we can adjust on the character. For example, there is a slim function, and if I crank this all the way to the right, we get slightly anorexic Roxy. But if I go the other way, negative numbers, the character as a whole starts looking like a normal person. And then if we come down to voluptuous here, they should have named it like a normal dial, and we'll just go ahead and increase this a little bit. So we get a character that looks, well, a little more like a normal human being. The reason I'm bringing this up is because when we create custom morph dials, we have the ability to let the program inherit characteristics that we've applied with other morph dials. Let me show you what I mean here. We'll come into the face. And I'd mentioned we'd be working with morph dials and magnets. You may be wondering, what's the difference between those two? There's a lot of overlap, and really how you use them is the difference. That doesn't help. Typically in the POSER ecosystem, and we'll look at this in just a little bit, magnets are used for more dynamic types of applications where the character is moving and something on the body changes as they move. Whereas the morph dials are more permanent characteristics like weight gain, like I just gave this character right here. However, they can be animated like eye blinks or something like that. So that's where you get this kind of strange little bit of crossover. Now, before we start working with our character, let me hide some of this stuff so it doesn't encumber the viewing experience here. Let's get Roxy hair. The hair is another character in here. I'll come to property and hide that. Also, we're getting some shadows cast in here, and I'm going to want to activate no shadow so it's a little easier to see what's going on. What I'd like to do is age our character. I'll select the head right here, and when I do that, come back over to the parameter dials, we see that we have got some head controls. And their expression controls, a pretty rich collection of things that you can do right here. So what I'll do, just for the sake of argument, is change the jaw. Let's go ahead and shift this back, and as they say in the art world, this is known as a weak jaw a little bit, where the chin becomes a little recessive. We're going to make this person look real, and we're going to age this character as well. So let me close that up, and this is where we could probably make the mouth. Can we, yeah, let's see what other expressions we might have here. No pucker. Let me, we've got a neutral face here. Let me go ahead and maybe go opposite joy. Can I? No, I can make the person smile, but not opposite. How about sadness? There, we're just going to go ahead and let that mouth relax a little bit, because as I age the character, I want the mouth to kind of come down at the corners. We're going to give the character some kind of jowls and maybe a little bit of a glottal under here when the neck skin gets old and starts to sag. So just a couple changes in here. Let me close this up. Well, how do we add a new morph dial over here to change these things? The way to do that is to come over to the morphing tool control, which is this little finger. and click on it, and a window will pop up with a ton of options on it. Now to create a new morph, what I'll do is come up here and click on that, the word that says morph, and just say new. And let's go ahead and name this something very original like Roxy Old. And there we go. Now you'll notice I just entered this, but nothing has appeared over there, and nothing will until we start actually changing the character, and then the dial will show up over here. So let's explain some of the tools here real quick. Because the tools are designed to work with characters, but also with clothing. So some of the features you might look at, and this is a POSER 2014 type of thing as well. But we've got the option right here for push. And below this, I need to talk about these three items here, relative to. Surface is the actual surface of the characters. I move this brush across. We see these little kind of colored sparkles that show up. Those are the densities of the, and let me go ahead and do a push here, maybe get a big brush. These are the densities or the effectiveness of the brush as you work around the character a little bit. So when it says surface, it pushes the polygon straight out from where it is, perpendicular, or what's called a normal, perpendicular to the actual body contour. You don't have to do it that way. You can make it come towards the screen or away from the screen, and normally you'll want to leave it at surface, but you can play with those and see if it works. Likewise for pushing in, we've got it pushing out again, and when I move the cursor back over and we see these little sparkles show up right here, you may be wondering why do they keep changing? Well, each one of these tools remembers what the last settings were down here, which is a huge time saver when you're working with it. And also I have to mention, I'm not using it for this demonstration, but these tool sets are, I should say, tablet aware. If you have a Wacom tablet or something like that, instead of manually going in here and adjusting these radiuses, the program will play very nicely with a tablet and pressure sensitive pen, so just know that. Flatten is flatten. One we'll be using quite a little bit is smooth, and then there's healing. When you totally trash a character and you need to fix it, you can go ahead and select that. These bottom ones you may or may not have depending on your program, and it has to do with working with clothes. There's a tighten fit, a loosen fit, and a sag. Sag works very well on humans when you're aging them, but you have to do a little work ahead of time. So let's get started with that. I want to pull these polygons out of the character. That way when I apply a sag to them, they won't be sagging back into the character. They will go ahead and it's like we pull it out and then it relaxes. So a little bit of a stretch and relax action right there. Let me give myself a little more room to work here. Now we're only going to work on one side of the face because we've got a function down here on the bottom which allows us to mirror everything. And before I get into this, let me go ahead and explain these checkboxes, which you will usually want to always leave on. There's the average normals, which distributes the action across adjacent polygons based on kind of their averages, so it's not a pure polygon. I mentioned it comes straight out from the character. This makes it work a little bit better. Accumulate allows you to take a brush back and forth over the character multiple times, and each time it will continue to increase the effect. Then stroke, if you want to do that, and again I just typically leave all these on. An important one right here happens to be head. You can confine these actions to very specific areas on the character. Now, this brush, if I happen to leave it very large, I can actually work subdermally underneath the skin and work on the tongue or things like that. We'll leave it at the head right here so that we can have some nice specificity to it. Okay, let's age our character a little bit. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit here. First thing I want to do is this upper eye area. I'll go ahead and add some weight to the ears. Now let's see, I've got the magnitude at 0.07. That's fairly light. I'm just going to click and drag, and we can see this starting to move out a little bit. I turned off shadows, and we still have dark areas simply because this is a downward facing surface and there's no downward, or I should say upward facing lights, so it's not a shadow per se, it's a lack of illumination, if that makes any sense. Okay, giving a little bit of extra weight to the eyes. Now right around the base of the eye, this is generally an area, especially towards the front, that as people get older, well of course the skin gets a little more pliable and soft depending on their eating, exercise habits, all this stuff. It also can fill with a little bit of fluid. Charming, isn't it? Okay, let's go ahead and come down here, and we'll go ahead and get a little bit here and just over exaggerate some of these areas. Let me move up. corner of the mouth down just a little bit, right here by the chin. Now you see it's not super smooth. I'm getting lumps in here, and that's something where we can go ahead and flatten and then use the smoothing tool just a little bit. Let me go ahead and bring this down. So we get this conjunction of the muscles that go underneath. There's several kind of round muscles that go around the mouth, including here. So when you pull the corners of your mouth back, these are flexing. These are the ones we're going to let sag just a little bit. Now let's see how this looks here. As I said, a little bit lumpy. So let's pop into the smooth tool here. And this one I'm going to increase the radius just a little bit. Cover a larger area. Now this doesn't flatten it. What it does is it removes some of the harshness of the points. If I'm moving the brush around and really hitting one particular vertex, and each one of these little dots is where the polygons join. If I pop open this, it's a little plainer to see exactly what's going on. So the red means it's really aggressively working with those polygons or the vertexes right there, and then the green means a little bit. So let me go ahead and come back to our regular view, and I may actually want to flatten this just a little bit. So it's this finessing property here. Let me go ahead and reduce the radius of that somewhat. Don't worry, we won't spend all day building this. You can see where you would spend a little bit of time tweaking it. Okay, we'll come down to the sag feature now. This is relatively small. Let me check the magnitude. We'll fix it if we don't like it. But I'll just click and stroke here, and we're going to go ahead and get the skin just moving downwards. You can always go back and fix it. You're not breaking anything. Especially on older folks, this is where you get most of this kind of sagging action, is right here along the cheek area. And we can run it along the jawline here a little bit if we want. Just make that a little more pronounced. When we use a magnet, I'm going to give this character a little bit of a glottal down here, and we can kind of presage that, plan ahead for it. Let me move up just a little bit. I'm back to my pull tool here to get it away. I'm going to come up one side of the neck here just a little bit. You know what that's like? You've seen it on folks. We've got some head there. I think I need to switch to neck. So that's where the group controls come in. The reason it's nice to do it this way is that if I overlap into an area, I'm not going to get something really that I don't want to get. However, we've got this conjunction between the head and the neck. This would be one time you might want to turn off group, because then we can go ahead and get a very nice seamless type of integration between these two. So that's what I'm doing right here. Sounds good. That's what I'll leave it as. Okay. So you get the idea. We could sit here and detail up the eyes. That is just a little harsh around the eye. Let's fix that. I will heal that, I guess, and that's too big. See, I'm capturing the eye underneath right here. Don't want that. We'll have a pirate looking character. Come back to groups, select head, selecting everything except the eye, but that is simply too large a radius. Okay, we'll heal this just a little bit. There. Alright, we want it to look the same on the other side of the character, providing you want to have a symmetrical looking character. We'll come down to mirror, and some of the options are flying off the bottom of the page, and I can't bring up this palette any higher. Sorry about that. But when you look at a character, the x-axis is left and right, the y-axis is up and down. You remember mathematics in school and doing graphs just like that. If the midline runs through the center of the character, that is where 0 is, and everything to the right is positive and everything to the left is negative as you look at the character. It's set up this way so you don't have to deal with the whole left and right idea. What I want to do is mirror the x negative over to the x positive. So I'm just going to click that. It's mirrored over. Hey, life's beautiful. So now we can see, great, it's in place. So our morph dial is over here. We have Roxy old. It's set to 0 right now. If I choose to close this up right now, we've got this applied. Now there's two numbers that occur with morph dials, and you may or may not have noticed them. When you work one dial, it may have been connected with another morph in the character when the dials were created. So what we have is a true implementation of the morph right here on the nasolabial fold. it's saying 0. This hasn't been moved at all directly with the dial. The number above it means that it is being driven by another morph. So as we did something else with the character, what it did is actually drove the morph just a little bit, and this could be the weight gain we were applying. So we get 2 points of reference. One, how much did I directly put in, and how much did other morph dials do it for me? When we come back here, we've got Roxy Old. If I come up to, actually if I bring this up and we just say, let's see, Roxy Old 100%, let me dial this back to 0. Let me just enter a value, it's faster. Alright, so there is nothing being driven in the character right now. This upper value for drive is 0. The implementation is 0. If I close my window right here, and then we drag this dial, now we get this dynamic quality to the character. So it's easy to over-exaggerate. Okay, creature features going on right there, and if we go the other direction, we get this implosion of face. If you don't want that, or you don't want these other morphs to override and influence that, well, how do you change that? Let me go ahead and zero this out again just to do it. The little controls over here to the right serve a couple purposes. One is it flies off to the side. We've got the ability, let me actually drag this over if it will let me. No. Nice. Okay. So we've got a reset in settings. If you do the same, you'll see it. We've got a graph. I'm going to talk about that. Dependencies, which is we can edit dependencies, is exactly what I'm talking about, where they're connected together. We could go very, very deep in this, and I don't think you want to do it. You want to, at least at this point, let's make some real-world applications here. But the other thing we can do is this other little icon right here. It's like a couple dots. If I click on that, we can see where we can also teach these to learn when I, do something and I want it to connect. This is how you get that stuff put together. So great, that's what we know about right now. If I come back to the little flyout arrow here and do settings, this gives us the parameter dials. We've got a minimum and maximum ability right here. Well, you know what? I want the minimum limit to be set at 0 for this, and maximum, how about 2? How about just 1? What this allows or makes sure is that the dial never gets over 1. So when I click OK and I try to click this backwards, it's not going to go. I can't create weird internal types of applications, and if I go all the way to the other side, it doesn't get any more significant than 1. So as I apply these other morphs to the character or whatever may be going on, we won't get these gross characterizations going on with the dial itself. Great, so that's working with morphs. Now, you might say, that's neat, so I spent all this time working with this. How do I ever use this again? Or do I have to do it every time I create a new document character? The answer is no. And let me start by saying 2 things. POSER is built to be a closed system. You can't take these morphs we just created and then export what are called morph targets for import or sale at the Renderosity store. If you would like to create morphs that you can go ahead and sell here at Renderosity, then you need to get something like Blacksmith 3D, who's got a separate tool, a separate piece of software in fact, for Mac or PC that allows you to create morphs, create the targets. I won't go into all the details, but the reason why is you can sell the data of change without selling the geometry of change. There's copyrights against using the character or distributing the character because that's owned by somebody else, but you can sell and distribute data to modify the character. So POSER doesn't let you export the data. You can reuse it in your own system 2 ways. One is to go ahead and when you're working with the character, you can save it, open a new scene, import the character, and then you can apply under figure. There's an option for copy morphs from. And this will allow you to target or I should say grab the morphs from the character we were just working on and then apply it to a new character. There's another object for that as well when you're working with clothes, but we're not working with clothes here for that. So we've got our basic aged morph in here. Let's add a magnet and get a little bit of a glottal going on under here. Let me back out a little bit. I knew her when she was young. Yes. Okay, anyhow. There we go. We need to add a magnet in here. And before I do that, let me show you the fact that magnets are actually already used in the program quite extensively, at least with Roxanne and Roxy. If we open the hierarchy editor, we'll see that, let me come over here. As we start scrolling through these things, we'll see, oh look, a ton of magnets, and they're all hidden. If I actually highlight this and come over to the properties palette for it, you'll notice that it's not selected. You can't directly select these because they're fundamental to how the character is built, and the authors of POSER and the character basically made it off limits for you to mess around with these things. So they're here. You see it's listed as visible. You can't see it. The only way you can see the magnets in place is by turning on the little button. And since this is a character's right arm, let's come down here. I'm showing you this because as we start applying a magnet, it'll make sense. If I come down to the right shoulder bulge deformer, you see the magnet light up right here. And it's connected, and magnets have three parts. Let's not talk about it. Let's go ahead and do that. Let me go ahead and close this up. With the character, I always come back to the body level because I'm kind of paranoid when I insert everything. Let's come to Object, Create Magnet. And this huge thing appears on the floor here. There's three parts to the magnet. Let me orbit the scene a little bit. The magnet proper here, which is magnet 1, we see that highlighted. The yellow thing on the bottom is called the bar, and if you've ever played with one of these in a science class, it sticks to the magnet and completes it, and science. Anyhow, then the last thing we've got happens to be this little mag zone here. These three parts are important because they can all parent to different things. And this is where the dynamicism of working with magnets comes in, because you can anchor this to a body, and as a body part moves into the zone of influence, then the deformation starts automatically. So kind of cool. What we're going to do, however, is stick this magnet up under her chin and make the skin sag here a little bit. So the first thing I'll want to do is grab the prop magnet base. And let's come back to parameters. Y translation, so it's going to come up. I want to get it near the face. I'll do the same thing with the mag zone, so they're at least in the same neighborhood, and then we can zoom back in on the face and work a little more closely. Okay, yay. Now I want to deform this downward. You don't have to turn the magnet upside down like I'm going to do, because you can actually take it and push it down through the bar and get the same effect. I do it just because I have a fragile mind and it is easier for me. So on the x-axis, I'm going to go ahead and rotate this. Not the zone. Let's select the bar or base. Okay. X-rotate, spins around. There we go. And let's, with the not Y-translate, Z-translate, get this near our character. And you know, I forgot this about Roxy. She comes in off-center. I have no idea why. Okay, there we go. We can see the props. Let's come to the zone and move it over as well. And you know what? That thing's huge. So we're just going to shrink it down a little bit here. And frankly, the whole magnet is rather large. So let's go ahead with the base here. Shrink the base, and it automatically grabs the magnet itself proper. So we're not dealing with this giant piece of hardware right by our character's face. Okay. We'll zoom in. And let me now bring this base up so that it's actually inside or right next to the jawline that we're going to be working with right here. So let's explain how you get these things to work. We'll come over to properties, and we've got the ability here to load morph targets into this if we want to. I won't do that for this demonstration, but that is something very fun to play with, and you'll get some surprising effects. And I don't mean strange monster effects, just the way you can integrate some of the morphs along with the magnet. What I'll do though is for this base, I'm going to set the parent to the neck. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want this, as the neck turns, I kind of want the base to follow it, and it's going to stretch the skin out just a little bit. So let's come down to neck, double click on it. Yay. Okay, let's come to magnetic zone. And this is a little bit off center now, isn't it? Let's move this around. Get it more in our character. let's see, Y translate, and this is probably off center too, right? Yeah, we've got it in there. Guess we moved it a little bit. Okay, move this back. Beautiful. Properties. The parent we'll set for this right now will also be, let's go ahead and maybe make this the jaw. Head, jaw. Double clicked on that and that is set. We're going to come back to the weight maps here. I want to do the last thing, which happens to be the magnet itself. And we need to select the object to deform. So what I'll do is come down to head here. I think that's going to be the one I want. And the reason it's kind of imprecise, it seems to vary on character to character. And I don't remember exactly, but we'll be able to tell really quickly if that's the right part. We'll come back to the zone. And this is all set up here because the magnet defines what you're going to deform. You come back to the magnetic zone to adjust the influence of that deformation. So what I'll do is say, okay, let's use a weight map. I'll click the little paint palette right here and we see the whole character light up and hey, we got it, we win. Life's good. Let me zoom in a little bit. Now, I don't want to deform everything here on the character. If I move the magnet now, it's just going to suck the whole head down like a powerful vacuum cleaner and leave the eyes where they are. Bad things will happen. It just won't look good. So what we can do if we want here with vertex weights is we can group and select by group if we want to, and only influence the head if we wanted. Yeah, I'm not going to do that right here, but what I want to do is set all to 0. This turns off everything and will allow us to paint. Now let's go to add here. I've got my paintbrush selected and you'll notice when I move over the character there's nothing showing up. Really important thing that is happening with the newer characters that come out of, or come with Poser I should say. They use something called the Poser Unimesh. And the Unimesh for the face does not recognize the brush when you start painting magnetic weight maps. Don't ask me why. I don't know the details. It doesn't. To fix that, you can come to Figure and Skinning Method and turn it back to Poser Traditional instead of Poser Unimesh. When we do that, and now we get a brush showing up, so we can go ahead and work with our character here. So we've got add. Strength is set relatively low. I need to rotate this so I can get under our character just a little bit. And that is too big, just too big. Okay. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. What I want to do is just come over and use this mirror function. Let me pull this up so you can see it. Mirror -x to +x, and that flips it to the other side. And I just did that, and nothing's happening here with our magnet. Let's see what's going on with that. Okay. Make sure everything is in order. Let's go ahead and double check the magnet and see what it's deforming. Go ahead and say, let's go ahead and expand this to the neck. Hierarchy does play a role here, so let me just double check that. Come back to the props, magnetic zone. Oh, groups. I know what it is. Let's make sure that we have head enabled there. Look at that. That's what wasn't working before. Didn't have that turned on. If I didn't want it to or I should say didn't want it to affect the neck, I could turn that off right here. But I want to make sure we've got a nice transition between the bottom of the head and the neck, so I'll leave that on. Alright, so let me select the magnet itself and come back to parameters, and let's go Y translate, and we can see we're getting this to move down a little bit. So how does this play into working with the zone? We can go ahead and reduce the size of the zone itself here, or move it around, and since it can be anchored to the head or anything like that, let's go ahead and scale this down just a little bit to 3. And you'll notice as I move it down, let's move it in and out here on the z-axis. See what's going on? We get this, hey, we can have our character swallowing if we wanted. If I think, well, that's too much in the front, I can move the zone back. Then I can go ahead and select the actual magnet itself. It's not going to let me grab that. Let me come back to magnet, and then we can go ahead on the Y translate. Let's pull that down a little bit further. So it's a nice dynamic way to work with this. So now if I select the head and we take the character and we twist it, we get this kind of lessening of it over here, just like you would if a real person was turning. And as the skin gets tight because they're turning their head, you get less of the effect going on. That is exactly what's happening here, and that is what makes it such a cool feature to go ahead and create some reality to your characters, even if you're just doing still life type of posing. So let me bring that back here, and we see the instance of the deformation from the magnet become more significant as that goes on. So really cool way to go ahead and personalize and just kind of create new characters out of the ones you have. So again, the dials over here, the morph dials, are more for permanent type things like we would want to do here. They blend with others. You can create them and you can save copies within your own document if you want. You'll notice we have magnet over here also for deformation. We can increase and decrease the strength of that right here on the dials to the side. So tremendous amount of flexibility that comes into it. And again, I have to emphasize, if you were skipping through the movies, that POSER doesn't allow you to export these to be sold or imported. You can import it from character to character. You can save your character into your own library and repurpose it. But if you want to create morphs for sale, that needs something like Blacksmith 3D's morphing tools, and that's a whole different ballgame. Very cool. But really fun, cool way to work with the tool sets that Smith Micro gives you with POSER.